Okay, good afternoon, everyone. For those of you who did not attend the summit day one yesterday, I am Valeriano Ramos, Director of Strategic Alliances at Everyday Democracy, and I'm also the coordinator of the Connecticut Civic Ambassadors Program. And I want to welcome all of you to day two of the summit. We had a great day yesterday with Kip Hawley, our keynote speaker. And so I was very pleased that we could have a hybrid event with people attending on Zoom and also at the Hartford Public Library. Now, before I start, I want to share with you some housekeeping information. This is a Zoom meeting, and there's some instructions that I want to share. And first of all, I want to mention that this meeting or this session is being recorded on Zoom. And also we had the video, we recorded the keynote event yesterday at the library. So we will be posting this video next week. And we will be sending you the link, and also we'll be posting the link in the newsletter, the main newsletter of the Civic Ambassadors. So if you're a Civic Ambassador, you'll get the newsletter and the link. But you will be sending the email to everyone as well. During this session, please keep yourself muted unless you are a panelist and the moderator for the panel. At the end, however, you're welcome to, during the Q&A, to ask any questions of the panelists. And then, of course, when you break out into small rooms, you'll be able to unmute yourself and turn on your videos so that you can participate in the small group conversations, okay? The chat feature is available for you to check information we're gonna post there. We're gonna post some really good links. And so you can please check the chat room at the end or during the course of the meeting. And after the panel presentations, as I mentioned, there will be small group conversations, and Jackie will be posting on the screen the options of which room you can choose to join for the small group. So you'll have a choice of choosing the room that you want to be a part of, and she'll explain that later on, okay? And finally, when the small group conversations end, we'll be coming back for the plenary at the end of the small group discussions. And we are going to then have the closing remarks and the swearing in of the civic ambassadors. We did not have an opportunity to do it yesterday. We didn't have a lot of people at the library, and some people had left, but we're going to do it today. So you're going to get sworn in today, those of you who are civic ambassadors, okay? All right, at this point, I'm very pleased to introduce our special panel, Barriers and Challenges to Inclusive and Equitable Civic Engagement, and its moderator, Mr. Steve Armstrong. Mr. Armstrong is the Social Studies Consultant for the Connecticut Department of Education. He is the president of the Association for the Study of Connecticut History. Steve is a past president of the Connecticut Council for the Social Studies and for the National Council for the Social Studies. He's an adjunct instructor in the History Department at Central Connecticut State University. And I'm glad to say, proud to say, that Steve is also a Connecticut Civic Ambassador, and he lives in South Windsor. I am pleased to welcome Steve, who will be introducing the panelists. Welcome, Steve.
Thank you very much, Val. Brian, just so I know, is there any news?
His mother just texted that he's on, but I don't see him on the list. So let me check in back with her.
Okay, no rush. Well, a little rush, but not bad. Yeah, my name's Steve Armstrong. I work at the State Department of Education, and I do social studies and civics related work. And I just wanted just a few comments from my world, from civics world. I think it's especially crucial, especially now. How about that? Especially crucial, especially now, that we have students engaged and involved in civic action. I mean, that's not an approach that's always been popular. Some of you may have had civics classes. Anyone ever have these dreadful civics classes where the major message was memorizing the names of the cabinet or something like that. That's not the civics that I would personally recommend, and that the civics world, don't we want kids, rather than just learning about government, we want kids to be engaged in government. So I think that's got to be a goal of education at this point. I think there's, as you know, in other states and perhaps too in Connecticut, there's some criticisms of civic education for, being too political. And I would say this to that criticism, that I think it's the civics teacher's job. It isn't to say, hey, you should go to this rally on this or whatever it is. It's the civics teacher's job and the history teacher's job, I think, to give the students the tools and the skills so they can decide where they want to be interested in. That I think that's crucial, that it's the job of a civics teacher to prepare the students for civic engagement, not just to, and certainly not to tell them where to go as far as that engagement. It's also crucial, I think many of you know, that in the last 20 years, social studies and history has been eliminated from elementary school curriculum. And that's not just in Connecticut, that's a nationwide thing. And I think that's been crucial for civic education. You can't start teaching a kid on how to be a citizen in like 6th grade or something like that. So that's a reason why I'm just making a pitch here that we want to have active kids, because shouldn't school be a place where kids start to learn to be citizens, right? That they start, and it can start as early as 1st grade, when the teacher gathers his or her kids around and says, we're going to make the class rules for the year. At some level, isn't that the introduction of civic engagement? So again, just to repeat, my message is, let's get kids engaged, let's get kids involved, but let's let the kids decide. You remember the term, and the term is taking informed action. Let's let the kids decide where they want to be engaged in, but let's give them the tools to do that. Brian, our first panelist. Brian, I don't know, maybe since you're on, you may want to do the introductions on this one. And could you tell the folks, I bet you could do this. You could do this in your sleep, I think, but could you tell the folks about the Kid Governor program a little bit?
Sure, I would be happy to. Thank you, everyone.
Brian, there's a 2-hour time limit on this, so you got to.
I got to cut a whole hour out of my introduction.
Right.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. It's an honor to be here. My name is Brian Cofrancesco. I work for the Connecticut Democracy Center at Connecticut's Old State House. I'm the director of the Kid Governor program, and it's an honor to be here as a civic ambassador myself, and we really appreciate you extending the invitation to our current Kid Governor, Makhi Ettienne-Modeste. If you're not familiar with Kid Governor, it is a free civics program for 5th graders. And as Steve said, we really see the value and importance in teaching kids and engaging kids in civics and informed action. And so our program teaches kids about being civically engaged by letting them practice it. So they learn about identifying community issues they want to change, how to research solutions to those problems, how to build platforms, and then how to run and vote in an election. And it's a way to allow them to see what a vote does and to see the results and consequences of their vote, and then give them the opportunity to support a candidate in an election. So today you will get to hear from our 2022 Kid Governor, Makhi. He's a 5th grader at John F. Kennedy School in Windsor. He ran for Kid Governor this past fall and was sworn in January at his inauguration at Connecticut's Old State House in Hartford. He ran on a platform of protecting our pets and has a platform that he's working on this year to make a difference to protect and help companion animals in our state. He also works alongside a cabinet of other fifth grade leaders. They are the other students who ran in the election in the fall, and has had an eventful week himself. He was at the state capitol all day Tuesday, met with Governor Lamont, Lieutenant Governor Bysowitz, and other legislators, and has to disconnect at 2 o'clock today to go to a press conference about prevention of cruelty to animals awareness month with Attorney General Tong, Senator Blumenthal, Department of Children and Families, and Department of Agriculture. So he is a busy kid, but is very passionate about making a difference and helping others and helping animals. So it's an honor to be here. I hope you enjoy hearing from him, and I will pass it over to Steve to begin his conversation.
Makhi, I think before you're going to speak, we're going to show, am I correct, Jackie? We're going to show something first. And then if it's okay, Makhi, then I'm going to ask you a couple of questions after that. Is that all right? Okay.
Yeah.
Now, it is my duty to administer the oath of office for 2022, Connecticut's Kid Governor, Makhi Ettienne-Modeste. Makhi, will you please join me at the podium? I'd also like to invite Makhi's family to join at the podium. Makhi, it is now time for you to take the official Kid Governor oath of office. Are you ready? I know you are. Please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear that you will support the fifth graders and the students of Connecticut during your one-year term and so long as you are a citizen thereof, and you will faithfully discharge the duties of the office of Kid Governor to the best of your abilities, so help you God?
I do.
Congratulations. You're awesome. And now it is my honor to present to you the Kid Governor Sash. Now, right here. Isn't that cool? This is the symbol of your office. You should wear this sash proudly when you address your constituents, make public appearances, or participate in programs. It's been worn by your predecessors, Elena Tipton, Jessica Broxham, Megan Kasparowski, Ella Briggs, Myra Stanfield, and Reese. Now I'd like to invite your Connecticut's Kid Governor, Makhi, to, oh, I messed up. First I give you this, then you get to give a speech, okay? So let me try to do this, all right? You stand right there, and I'm gonna do this. Isn't that awesome? Please welcome Connecticut's Kid Governor. And now, sir, we'll invite you to give your inaugural address.
Good morning, students, teachers, community members, and guests. Thank you for all being here this morning or watching Inauguration Day online. First, I would like to address how grateful I am to have the opportunity to serve as the 2022 Connecticut's Kid Governor. I could have not achieved this without the support of each fifth grade student who participated in the Kid Governor program this fall. It was your support that continued to motivate me to do my best throughout this process. Not many students get this opportunity, and I am excited to begin working with my cabinet on my Protecting Our Pets platform. I hope to make you all proud. This opportunity would not be possible without the support of my family. My parents have always told me I could achieve anything I put my mind to. I would also like to thank my sisters, Zaina and Amira, for always being there when I needed help or guidance. My dogs, Paco and Blue, for being my personal pets to protect and the best companions. I would also like to thank my principal, Miss Mitchell, and my teacher, Miss DaCosta, who are here today, as well as my teacher, Ms. Turner, for supporting me with my speeches throughout filming my campaign video. To the Windsor Public Schools community, including Superintendent Dr. Hill and Director of Business Services, Ms. Batchelder, who are here today. And the Windsor Board of Education, thank you for all you have done to encourage me. Without the CT Democracy Center and the hard work of its staff, the Kid Governor program would not be possible for the fifth grade students of Connecticut. Thank you for helping us make a difference in our communities and state. Finally, I would like to thank the dignitaries who are here today and who inspire us to help in our own communities. Lieutenant Governor Bisewicz, Deputy Secretary Bates, Deputy Commissioner Nesmith, Justice Ecker, and Representative Garibay. Protecting our pets is extremely important, and when I got the opportunity to run for Kid Governor, I knew students needed to know the signs of animal abuse and the importance of showing kindness to companion animals. I never want to see a pet or companion animal hurt, and by educating each other, we can work together to prevent cruelty from happening. To be successful as Connecticut's 2022 Kid Governor, I will need the assistance of not only my cabinet, but also you, the fifth graders of Connecticut. My platform has 3 points. First, I will educate Connecticut's fifth graders about how to recognize the signs of animal abuse. They will also need to understand the importance of showing kindness to companion animals. I will do this through a live virtual educational program that fifth grade classes across the state can watch from their classrooms. Experts from the Connecticut Humane Society and the Animal Control Unit at the Department of Agriculture will join me to teach this important information. Second, I will create a statewide poster contest this spring where fifth graders in Connecticut can draw attention to the importance of showing kindness to companion animals through art. The purpose of this contest is to raise awareness for pets that can't speak for themselves. It is our job to protect our pets. I will be following in the tradition of past Kid Governors by working with the Department of Children and Families on this poster contest. Finally, it is my goal to donate and raise funds for shelters that help animals that have been abused. I will need your help to do this. You can hold a collection drive in your school where students and staff can bring in items or give a monetary contribution to a local animal shelter or humane society. I will share a list of items that you can collect and donate, as well as ideas for items that you can make yourself to help pets in shelters and humane societies. I hope all Connecticut fifth graders watching today will help me with these 3 points. Together, we can make a big difference in our state and help many animals who need us. Thank you for all your support. I am so happy to be Connecticut's 2022 Kid Governor. Remember to treat companion animals with kindness and protect our pets. Thank you.
Okay, Makhi, where you're here still, right? There you are, right there. Couldn't see you for a second, Makhi. So could I ask you, I'm just going to ask you a couple questions if that's okay. Great platform. What have you done with this since, I know it's only a few months, but what have you done with this since your inauguration?
So I've done a lot since my inauguration. I've done my first 2 platform points, which was my educational program in March, and the platform, the poster art platform, that was my second one. And then I'm doing my third one, which is donating items locally for local animal shelters or humane societies.
Have you found that your platform is a platform that other fifth graders are interested in? Is this a platform that you think is popular with fifth graders?
I think that probably it's pretty popular with fifth graders, but I want them to definitely know more about animal cruelty and how to show kindness to them. But in all, I think it's definitely popular with fifth graders.
Thank you. And just out of curiosity, could you, just for a second, could you give us some of the meetings or events? You know, you're going to a press conference today. What are some of the other meetings that you've had up to this point?
So, of course, like Mr. C said, I went to the Capitol this Tuesday. It was definitely fun. I got to meet the governor and I got to talk to him and ask him questions. And of course, my inauguration. I've done a lot since being chosen as kid governor, and I really think that that's something that I wouldn't have the chance to be if I wasn't kid governor.
I have to ask you, does doing this make you nervous? Because you don't seem nervous. You're doing a great job. Are you nervous right now?
I'm pretty nervous, but I think that the more that I do these conferences or the more that I get used to talking in front of people, I think the less that I'll be nervous.
Great, good job. And Brian, anything else you want to tell us about Makhi or from your end about the program that he's working on?
Well, I think to elevate his points about the interest amongst other students, he had more than 60 students from all over the state who entered his poster contest to show ways to show kindness. And I think we had 800 or 900 students across K-12 who registered to watch his virtual education program where he helped teach kids about this issue. And so I think one of the greatest parts of the way Makhi designed his platform is that there are opportunities for students to participate. And that's the big thing, is we want not just for the kid governor to have an experience, but for kids to be able to participate and provide avenues to participation. And so that, I thought from the start, was very innovative about his platform, was there were opportunities for involvement. Makhi, perhaps you could tell everybody about your cabinet and about how you work with other students in your cabinet to make a difference on a variety of issues.
Yes, so my cabinet, which is made up of the other 6 finalists in the Kid Governor program, those are the kids who help me with my platform, and I can also help them with theirs, which all of the 6 are Brian from Meriden, whose platform is on physical activities in school. Olivia from New London, whose platform is on child food insecurity. Samantha from Hartford, whose platform is on a cleaner CT. Elizabeth, whose platform is on Elizabeth, whose platform is on climate change. Brian, sorry. And Sadvik's, whose platform focuses on climate change too.
Makhi, thanks for sharing, and we're going to move to our next panelist, but we'll come back to you, okay? But thanks for coming, and your work is incredibly impressive. I can assure you. So the next two panelists, by the way, the biographies I have of them are about a page long. So I'm gonna, if with their permission, I'm gonna do a little highlight reel here for them. But the next person, and one of, I really mean this, one of the most dedicated Connecticut Civic ambassador is Antonia Edwards. And Antonia serves on the board. I mean, I'm cutting this, right? This isn't even the whole thing. She serves on the board of the Greater Hartford African American Alliance, the Connecticut Council on Developmental Disabilities, the Children's Behavioral Advisory Council, and many others. She's the co-founder of her own grassroots organization, Solidarity. And in 2021, Antonia worked with State Senator Saud Anwar on SB1. That was the bill declaring racism a public health crisis. And during the 22 legislative session, she's worked with Kevin Kelly, State Senator Kevin Kelly, on HB 5001, an act concerning children's mental health, and SB 451, task force concerning children's mental health, excuse me. So, Antonia, I've always incredibly dedicated, very knowledgeable. So I'm wondering if you could just share some of the barriers, some of the challenges, and some of the successes you've had in your work.
Thank you so much. Thank you for allowing me to speak. And that was a great summary. I really appreciate it. And thank you for all the accolades. I am originally from Boston. I've lived in Connecticut twice. This is my second time living here. The first time was basically short-lived. But when I got here 5 years ago, I really hit the ground running and wanted to make a difference. I've been in a family advocate since '99. My son's autistic and basically had to navigate the systems by myself. At that time, not many kids were autistic in the Black community, or it wasn't really heard of. So basically, when I came to Connecticut, I hit the ground running. I did the Partners in Partnership Leading Virtual Program. I signed up for all these different boards, and I wanted to understand the landscape of Connecticut and learned it very quickly. I found that there was a huge diverse disparities in the communities. I find that Connecticut is extremely segregated, and those policies have been in place for years, and it never really corrected itself. It started off with the redlining, but then turned into a zoning problem, and it's basically put in place design to keep minorities out of the suburban communities. So basically, when you look at it, Black and brown people, or people who are considered minorities, live in only 3 of the 8 counties in Connecticut, and that's Hartford County, New Haven County, and Fairfield County. And if you look at certain bills and legislation like DSEC Connecticut, they're trying to remove those barriers to allow people to live wherever they want to. So I signed up for that legislation as well too. I find that most people in the underserved communities are just really intimidated, really like just frustrated and just giving up in reference to finding out what they can do to make any changes in Connecticut. Because I was an outsider, most people didn't really buy into anything I was saying. I mean, because as an outsider, you can see things differently from somebody who's always lived it. So when I was explaining the different disparities that I seen, everybody was like, oh, they're not going to do anything about it. So I basically led by example. And so I fought the fights, and I teamed up with legislators. I attended meetings. I wanted to make sure I was very versed and knowledgeable about the things that I was concerned about. And basically, I was able to be successful with Senator Anwar with racism and public health crisis. For Black people, that racism stems from slavery, and you can't dissect and you cannot fix the problems with racism of Black people until we address the historical context of U.S. chattel slavery. And so that was one of the biggest things I wanted to put in place. And so he did. He actually added in to study the historical context of Black American descendants of U.S. chattel slavery, the whole historical context. So then I got into a situation with a personal experience. My grandkids were kidnapped in 2017. The stepfather didn't really serve any time, but as a result, my grandkids had severe mental illnesses, and nobody would listen to us. They made a mockery of us. We would go to, the hospital with videos saying that this was going on. They're like, oh, because you work in the medical field, you're over exaggerating, and they coded their Counts-Mounts Down syndrome. And so because of that, they didn't take us serious. As a result of that, 2.5 years later, my granddaughter killed her brother as a result of the mental illnesses that they didn't take serious. And so I fought hard to make sure that the recognition was in place so that no other family has to go through that with their children because of their color of their skin, because of cultural incompetency. And so I worked hard with Senator Kelly to get that done. And as a result, HB 5001 has been passed. And I also had input in the 451 bill, which is SB 451, to make sure the task force is leveled out. So it's not just all professionals. We want community organizations, we want parents, we want people who have real lived experience to sit on these boards and talk to people about what's going on. So Val and Jackie and I, we have a long relationship, and I've been a civic ambassador for quite some time, but I didn't really talk about what I did because I didn't want the prestige. I wanted results. And so when I finally spoke to them, I think it was late last year, they were amazed at all the work that I did. And I didn't want to say anything until I had stuff done because that's who I am. And so I worked in silence. And so at this point, I just feel as though I've already led by example. The proof is in the pudding, and I'm trying to convince people to speak up. I mean, nothing can be done unless you speak to people. And a lot of people have a preconceived notion about the legislators and people who could actually help them, that they're not listening. But a lot of them are begging and craving for people in underserved communities to tell them their lived experiences. You have, news stations like CT Mirror. They want to talk to people to find out what's going on. I currently work for 211, and I now hear about the severe housing crisis. It is absolutely absurd what's going on right now in Connecticut with the housing crisis, with the homelessness. And I don't hear people speaking up. So here we go again. Nobody's speaking up. So every time I see something that's like devastating, I'm like, why come nobody's speaking up? So I do that by best I can to address issues that I think that will impact everybody. And mostly the people who are in underserved communities. But when it's all said and done, I feel like, the people in the community are grateful in the sense because they benefit from it, but it would really help if people get civically engaged and speak up and learn the legislation process. And I think it starts with middle school. Me and Val were talking about that, like 5th grade. We need, poli-sci, we need civic classes. And just like Makhi, we need that in our school systems. There's a lot of kids that are in Hartford that have never been to the LOB. They don't feel comfortable. They said they're not wanted, but I always see, busloads of suburban kids there. So how do people get civically engaged if it's not a part of their lifestyle, if it's not a part of their educational process? And that's what I want. And so everything that I've done was basically to set the clock, back or to set the record straight for things that I found were misjustices. And I will continue to do that.
Thank you, Antonia. Could I ask, if, with your permission, a couple questions?
Anything.
Sure. Have you been able, and I know the answer is yes, but how have you been able to get the communities that you work with to become more engaged? What are strategies that work for you? I guess is what I'm asking, sort of.
So basically, on an individual level, when I talk to people, it seems as though people, just hear me out, in Connecticut, have a one subject served train of mind. So one person, housing's an issue, jobs an issue, money's an issue, or school's an issue. They don't look at the bigger picture and they look at all of it. So if you're not addressing their immediate need, you really don't have their attention. So what I try to do is I try to get involved with people or organizations that address everything. And I've been able to do that with the Greater Hartford African American Alliance. I really love this organization, and anybody can join. They really have committees for each. They have legislation, they have health, they have safety, they have now, they also have education. So it's an organization that addresses all issues. And every week we meet and we talk about everything. And I think that until you put everything on the board in one setting and get everybody's attention, then it's nothing going to be done, because people are living in the now. And especially with COVID, it's really devastated everybody, and it's put everybody on an even playing field. So it's not necessarily more racial with the COVID. It's just that COVID unveiled the disparities were already there, and that Black and brown and underserved communities are hit more powerfully with the impact of those disparities. So I just feel as though I was listening to Kip yesterday, and I did ask him what would motivate people. And it seems like he said, like, you have to meet people where they're at. And I've always believed that. And I think that we have to go above and beyond to make spaces for people where we can get them together and talk about everything, so that you're not just capturing the attention of somebody who's worried about housing, somebody who's working on a job. I mean, and it just seems as though it's just a one track mind for most people, and you have to gauge them and address all things that may be triggering their ill effects.
Mhm.
Housing may be an issue, but if you don't have a job, how can you pay for a house? That kind of stuff. You have to look at the bigger picture, and I think that's what we have to train people to do.
If an individual has an issue that they're personally interested in, and I think you're right, it's usually an issue.
Mhm.
Have you found that legislators are receptive to conversations with constituents, or is that a hard road to get there, or what's your experience with that?
Again, I find that if one person says, I'm having an issue with money or I'm having an issue with housing, if you get multiple people that say the same thing, then that gets their attention. I don't think that legislators can just address one issue, just like the president. They can't focus on one person's personal problem. However, what I'm trying to get people to understand is you're not alone. There are many more people facing the same issue that you face. And if we all rally together and present our lived experiences, it will get more attention. Like right now with the housing crisis, we have so many people on the streets with their kids homeless. We have the rent hikes. I'm saying people's rents are going up 40%. Nobody's saying anything. And I'm like, why? I just don't understand why we're not talking about it, because if we talked about it, then we could probably get rent control. We don't know. But you have to speak about it. It can't just be the news outlets that are talking about it. We're the people with the lived experiences. That's what counts. I'm saying, like I have elderly people who have a fixed income. They were paying $900 a month for rent. Now their rent's up to $1,500. They don't know how they're going to live. We need to hear about that with the legislators. A group of people need to band together and talk about these issues. Now, this is the funny aha. There are people that do protest and complain about certain things, whether it be the mask mandates, the vaccines, whatever. We need to follow their suit. They're exercising their rights. They want to know what the legislation, to know what their personal experiences are. We in the underserved communities and people who feel that they were at disparities need to do the same thing. My grandmother always said, closed mouths don't get fed. And that's a cliche.
And if you wouldn't mind, and this is, I guess, an opinion question, or no, it's not an opinion question. Do you think the needle in Connecticut has moved at all on the issue of segregation?
No, absolutely not. It's gotten worse. I'm going to be perfectly honest with you. I'm from Boston. My family's from the Deep South. We had a violent segregation in Boston. You know that with the bombing, the bus. My mom was a bus driver who was scared that she wasn't going to come home every night. I actually grew up in Roxbury, but I went to school in the suburbs. We were ridiculed and chased every day. So I've lived in violent times. This is not violent here. And so this is fixable. And so by being in the Deep South every summer, I actually went to the plantation that my great-grandparents were slaves on. So I know racism, I know segregation. This is fixable. This is in Connecticut. And I was really shocked at how bad it was. And I just feel like it's 360 Jim Crow. I lived at the tail end of Jim Crow. I'm 56. I seen it. And I just don't understand why I'm living this now and today. It's just unheard of. It just doesn't make any sense. And when I did do legislation for DSEG, I heard things like, oh, why would we want them in our backyard? Why would colored people want to be here? So the stigma and the statements and the people who are preventing desegregation are still the same as though we're back in the Jim Crow era. What I do find is that, again, like Black and brown people predominate 3 counties only. There's 8. Why aren't people able to live whatever they want to? If you go to New York, you go to Boston, people are diverse. They can live wherever they want to. And I live in New Haven now. New Haven is the most diverse community in Connecticut. Everything else is black and brown, underserved, poverty stricken. And it doesn't make, and it's obvious. It's very obvious. And so people who prevent people from living in other communities, whether you want to or not, makes a clear statement of racism and segregation. So no, I think it's gone backwards. And if you look at the now housing problem, you have people who were able to pay the certain rents that they were able to pay, and now they can't, so now they're homeless. You have landlords who are evicting people for lapse of time, not because they didn't pay their rent, they raised their rents and they can't pay it. So they're running to the courts, getting evictions. Now those people are homeless. You have a lot of people who through COVID now have 0 income. Those people are now evicted. How do they get a place with 0 income when the landlords want 3 times the monthly rent in income? If you don't have 3 months, if your rent's $1,000 and you don't have $3,000 in income per month, you're not even qualified. You have to have a 700 credit score, and you have to have 3 times that much in security to get in. So all those barriers are against people who are in the underserved communities, whether they be Black and brown or any other minority group. It's the haves and the have-nots here, but it just happens to be that it pans out to be the haves, which are more Caucasian, and the have-nots, which are Black and brown. But that's what Connecticut's all about to me, in my personal opinion. And it's just really sad. I talk to people every day who have been put out of the warming centers because they closed on March 31st and triage for families that were in hotels. They're literally on the street with their kids. So guess what? DCF becomes involved. DCF is not involved in more people's lives than they are in the Black and brown community. So this is really bad. It's really bad right now. And so my thing is that I don't know how to fix it personally. I know it needs money. And another thing too, most of the underserved communities didn't get the American Rescue Funds. There's no record of them receiving the American Rescue Funds to cure some of the stuff that was transpiring before COVID, but also as a direct result of COVID. So I don't know how to fix it other than the fact that people are gonna really have to speak up. I mean, they have to speak up and tell their lived experiences. And we need to talk to people who are on the street with their kids that have no place to live. We need to talk to the people that they've been evicted because their rent was raised 40% for no reason. We have a lot of landlords coming from New York, raising the rents and raising the bar, and they're gentrifying, the cities that most Black people and brown people live in. Connecticut doesn't pay salaries like that. I'm from Boston. A one bedroom is $3,900. New York is about the same. Connecticut can't handle $1,500 and $2,000 rents. We know that. It's the northernmost cheapest place to live. So to all of a sudden bombard people with these astronomical numbers doesn't make any sense, especially after a devastation like COVID. So guess who suffers? The Black and brown and the other minorities in the underserved communities. And I'm not saying that other Caucasians don't suffer either, but they have generational wealth and they're able to bounce back, where all these other races don't have that. They historically don't have the generational wealth to bounce back. And they also tend to get the most lowest paying positions. And it's just really sad for me.
Thank you very much.
No problem.
Folks, we'll have time at the end if you have questions or comments or additions at the end of, not at the end of the day, but at the end of this session. We'll have a few minutes for discussion so we can continue on these themes. All right. An equally dedicated civic ambassador is Elizabeth Joseph. And Elizabeth serves now as the Associate Director of Community Engagement at the Ferguson Library in Stamford. She's led community dialogues in race and inequity for over 5 years and engaged over 300 citizens in these dialogues. She serves on several cultural and humanitarian nonprofit boards. She's been a civic ambassador since the very beginning of the program, and in 2021 received the Paul Eicher Award for her work in community building and engaging the community in race equity dialogues. So Elizabeth, could you tell us perhaps a bit about your experiences, the good, the bad, and the ugly, I guess, or something?
Sure.
But just go ahead.
So I think, after following Antonia, it really kind of stresses the reasons why I wanted to bring these community dialogues here to Stamford, because of these inequities, because of the segregation and the racism, which in my opinion is very overt, very obvious. And so I had really wanted to tackle some of that, which some people, I think, did not really understand sort of the weight of it, did not understand how it was sort of impacting everyday people. So really, I think the basis of the dialogues that I started in Stamford is really about developing and expressing community care, because what we really wanted to do was show that there was just people, everyday average people that live and work in this community, that we really cared about individuals like the ones that Antonia spoke about. And what we really wanted to do is kind of take the free riders who always sort of just go by what happens in this world, and then the community stakeholders and all of them, and bring them together and have a conversation about lived experiences, their backgrounds, their aspirations, and really kind of build what we would call a connected community. So in our earlier dialogues, what we really want is just to bring people together and kind of share our humanity, right? Because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if you're Black or brown or Latina or gay. It's really about knowing that each of us at the end of our our life journey want the same things for our families and for our neighbors in our community. So what we had done is just bring people together, and we really just didn't look at kind of organizational support for these dialogues. What we really looked for is also sort of community connectors such as Antonia to really help us deliver these dialogues and really make them and sort of authentic and real and really about kind of coming to terms with the concerns, issues that people faced here in Stamford. I think it was important for us that when we did it, intentionality is a buzzword that gets used all the time, but really being intentional about who we wanted in the mix, really think about diversification, not just in terms of like race and ethnicity, but age, ableism, I mean, there was just so many things that we really took into consideration when we brought people together. The heart of our conversations also needed to be about humility. It needed to be about hospitality, because you can't bring people together without providing some of the basic sort of needs such as hospitality and humility, because everyone that comes really needs to come with an open heart and an open mind. So really creating an environment where all of that is possible. It's also important for me that we're not just bringing people who are, sort of big city leaders into the conversation, because it's great at the end of the day to like have them listen and then, but really solutions to issues don't come from them, right? Because a lot of times, a lot of our city leadership, our nonprofit leadership, don't really know who they're serving.
Right.
I mean, they don't know who they're serving. Some organizations don't even know who they work with. I mean, they don't even know all their employees. So a lot of times the disconnect is there. And that was really obvious when we ran a pilot program this year, where we took city sort of nonprofit leadership and the people that work in those organizations and made them have a conversation with each other, so that they were really aware of sort of the grassroots and the grass tops, and really building some connections between each other. Because really, when we talk about community change, we don't ever like come together. We don't ever really come together, and we talk in silos, and we talk amongst each other. But really what I had wanted to create is an opportunity for everyone to come together, because change is not possible in silos. What we really want is people to work on change together. And that means everyone from like the mayor to the person who's homeless. It's really important that change comes from people, and it doesn't really happen just in one level. And that was sort of part of our journey, to really make sure that people who generally don't interact with each other really come together and talk about that. Because like Antonia said, Connecticut is one of the major perpetrators of segregation and discrimination. And a lot of people in power and people who are kind of close your eyes or walk a singular path never get to see the entire landscape. And what we wanted to do is expose that. And then once that problem is exposed, that's when you start working on the issues. And we really value everybody that's in our community, and they don't necessarily have to have money. They don't have to have power. All they need is the gifts that they have, like whether that's like dedication or time, the ability to bring people together. So we really look at building our community through who we call community and social connectors. And that's really, I think, the strength of like our dialogues, and sort of the basis and for change and awareness.
You know what's fascinating, or not fascinating, but actually tragic to me? Listen, I mean, I know the statistics that you're referring to. And by the way, as I'm sure you're aware, the statistics in education aren't pretty either, if you're
Right.
talking about segregation. but there are many people in suburban Connecticut who this isn't really even a blip on their radar screen,
Right.
which is, I don't know if you would agree with me on that, but which is to me tragic.
It is. I mean, because if you think about it, there are still sundown towns in the state. There is all kinds of excessive punishment, especially at an academic like a K-12 environment where Black and brown kids are being punished excessively in comparison to their white counterparts. There's just, I think there's a lot of inequity and racist policies that really inhibit growth and development for Black and brown communities here in Connecticut.
Mhm. Just out of curiosity, are who attends your dialogues? Or who do you invite community people, or how are your dialogues actually structured, if you don't mind me asking?
Well, we actually have used some dialogue guides published by Everyday Democracy. One is called Facing Racism in the United States. And what we do is we kind of tweak it to Stanford so it's more relevant to our community. We have worked with faith-based communities to host and hold the dialogue. So really, really looking at where people are and going to them as opposed to like using one organization as like sort of the be and end all of, and really empowering people to kind of take the dialogue and take the learning and move towards change and action. And then building leadership out of it, right? I mean, because for a lot of them, it's really their first journey and foray into leadership and ownership about a problem. And it's about like sort of taking that learning and moving towards advocacy like Antonia did, because I think people leave the dialogue just feeling so much more ignited and passionate about making change. So I think that's really what we want to do. We want to take associations, but build other associations along with it, really kind of using the term that Kip Holly used yesterday, which is building associations within associations.
Thank you. And our fourth panelist is it Sadia? Is that, I don't want to mispronounce it. Is that correct, Sadia? You're muted. Can you unmute? Can you hear us okay? Sadia, can you hear us okay? Okay, we can't hear, or at least I can't hear you. So, and that, see, nobody said you're muted before 2020, right? That wasn't a term that anybody used.
Can you hear me?
If you, a little soft, Sadia, can you somehow either maybe come closer to the mic or just a little soft?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, even a tiny bit loud, I think just a tiny bit louder if you could.
Can you hear me now?
That's great.
Okay.
Okay. So we have a fifth grade, and by the way, when we were talking about, I was talking about, you know, we need social studies and civics in the elementary school. Doesn't Kid Governor exactly do that? But we also have as our fourth panelist, Sadia Zakaria from Norwich Free Academy. She's 15, and I'm guessing, Sadia, a sophomore?
Yes.
A sophomore, and she was born in Egypt, but she's Sudanese, And she came to the US in 2016, learned English here. Her first language is Arabic. And her first engagement, civic engagement, was in middle school with a group that's called Hearing Youth Voices. And it helped the voices of youth in New London to be heard. And there's a middle school program of Hearing Youth Voices, and there's a high school program of Hearing Youth Voices. So Sadia, could you just talk about the activism that you have and what you do, and if you have some thoughts on any of the other issues that have been brought up?
So when we were in New London, when I was in New London, I moved to Norwich last year. So I'm like no longer engaged in that program because I don't have a way to get there. But I do try to like be civically active. When we did I went to New London High School before I came to NFA, and we were talking about we don't want the police in our schools because that's scary, and it's like we feel like criminals in the school, and the schools already feels like jails with the security guards and stuff. So bringing the police makes it feel even like more scarier for students, especially if like you just came from a different country and you're here and you're like, oh my gosh, the police, what are they doing here? Are they gonna come take someone? Or if like you're here illegally and you're like, are they here to take me? And it's like scary. Yeah. Um.
Could I ask you this, Sadia? Do you find, or from your knowledge, are students interested and engaged in issues? And I know it's harder for that to happen coming out of COVID, when everybody, their education was either at home or was part at home. So are kids interested in affairs? Are kids interested in social justice? What's your, at a place like Norwich Free Academy, what's your thoughts on that?
Most kids I know are interested in it. In London last year during COVID, we used to have like online seminars, and um, we used to have like workshops on police brutality against people of color, and yeah, and how we want our school system and our education to be changing, and to have more civic engagement and more topics that aren't like just like we want a new education system to talk more about the civics and our history, the real history, and yeah.
I think probably, well, I'm almost certain that most people on the panel and in the audience know that starting next fall, that every high school in Connecticut will be offering an elective course on African American, Black, Latino, and Puerto Rican studies. So, I mean, I know it's only elective, I know, but I think that's because, like you said, Sadia, I know countless kids that I've spoken to myself who, when they talk about what they learned in US history, they just said, I wasn't in there. You know, my history wasn't included in that, or it was included in that in the most perfunctory way. So hopefully, you know, this is a start, having an elective course, but hopefully this will allow students to, and you know what, I think shouldn't every kid, regardless of where they are in Connecticut, whether they live in New Haven or some, you know, or in Sharon or someplace, shouldn't we know more about the other people that live in our state?
Yeah.
You know, and there's right now, tragically, that's not the case. What else, by the way, just out of curiosity, Sadia, do kids find is not good about education right now? Just from your, forgetting about kids, how about from your own personal, you're a smart young lady, how about from your personal perspective?
For me, for like English, we could have like more modern books and stuff like that talks about real problems that are going on right now. And like in our history, we could have like we could like the books we have are like about then like our it's like history, it's like back then. But if they could have like a 15-minute session of class or like less, like 5 minutes, like I do now, and we could learn what happened yesterday and stuff, and or what happened during the weekend or this week, and what we think is going to happen, like making a hypothesis. Yeah.
Thank you. And I think regrettably, and very, very nicely stated, Sadia, I think, as I'm sure everybody on the panel is aware, that attempts to make education more contemporary and and books that students read more contemporary. I don't have to tell you that in some states of the United States, that's not perceived particularly positively. But that would be a completely different discussion. So how about this? I've seen on the chat, there's been some comments. How about if we open it up with discussion? First off, I'd ask any of the panelists if they'd like to say, if there's more that you'd like to say about anything before we open it to the larger audience. So Makhi, Elizabeth, whoever, anybody that would like to speak first, and then we'll get some audience things. Elizabeth, Makhi, Antonia, Sadia, any additional comments? All right, so Antonia, you were going to say, I'm sorry if I cut you off.
I just can't really think of anything, but listening to, you're saying Makhi, Elizabeth, and also Sadia and whomever else, it's really important that we kind of convince people to speak up. And I think that Elizabeth was saying the same thing, getting people in a room and basically trying to address all the issues. It's just, when I asked yesterday, how do we hold leaders and accountable? And I wasn't talking about like leaders in like, legislation or whatever, but leaders in the community, because I think we're the liaison between the legislation and what else happens in the community. And so I was just trying to figure out, what is our sense of responsibility? What more should we do? And if anybody has any like follow up with that, like Elizabeth or Sadia or Makhi, to find out, what do you think that we could do more of to bring and raise more attention to the issues that are concerning, to make people feel comfortable to speak up? Because that seems to be the biggest problem. People just do not speak up, and for some reason they're not comfortable with it. And that's the hardest part, is getting people to tell what's going on with their lived experiences.
I think that's a really good sort of comment, Antonia, but I was also thinking about another challenge that I know that all of us face, which is really apathy, right? Because people have given up, a lot of times given up hope. There's just complete mistrust or distrust in their government and their leadership, and think that like nothing's going to change, or like their voices don't matter. And I think that that's a huge challenge that like we have to face. And how do we do it? And then sometimes we can't do it with a collective. We can't go in front of people and stand on a soapbox and talk about like why it's important to like be involved and be engaged. But we can talk to people individually, like you do, Antonia, right? Because that's really where change comes from. It really comes at like the individual level. And then hopefully there's an impact, there's a cascading effect after all of that. And some of us are very sort of very engaged, and we really want change right away, and we want it like right now. But as we all know, it doesn't happen overnight, and it's chiseling at it for like days and years. I mean, if we're still dealing with some of the effects of Jim Crow now, I mean, it's not going to happen tomorrow. But we can't just say a few people will be involved in it. We really need to mobilize our communities, and we need to mobilize like our neighbors and our friends and our families to do this. I mean, really, I'm going to go back to a quote that really sort of guides my own life, which is a quote by like Dolores Huerta, who had worked with Cesar Chavez on the farm movement. And she always says every day is an opportunity to organize. And I really take that to heart. And I really sort of encourage other people that show some inkling or some interest to like, we really don't have to be bystanders in our own lives, in our own communities, right? We can actually like have some power. I mean, look at you, and you're like such an incredible example of that. And I think that all of us can like follow your example in your footsteps.
Thank you, Elizabeth. You as well. Thank you so much for that compliment.
Laura and Kate, I think you made some interesting comments in the chat on rural and suburban Connecticut. Would either of you be willing to talk about those a little bit?
This is great. I think it's important to get beyond talk, certainly, is to get involved in your local politics, is to get involved in your local boards, like your zoning commissions, because that's where all those decisions are made. Board of Finance, zoning boards, city zoning boards. This is the toughest spot, is to get involved on the local level. But that's really where all this begins and where change can actually happen. And it's an easy thing to say and a hard thing to do, but that's really where the heart of the matter gets discussed, and that gets kicked up to the higher levels.
And that's an important point, Laura, because many people are afraid to participate in these local town kind of commissions. And one thing that I've always told people that are sort of hesitant or afraid is find someone, like if it's a person of color, find another person of color who knows some of those people, who can sort of invite you to meet them and for you to then be nominated. Many times it's the mayor or the first select person that nominates these people. So having someone like another person of color, or if you're young, if you're a high school kid, for example, are interested in joining one of the commissions, talk to someone who knows some of the commission members and also the mayor or first selectman, and sort of introduce them so that they know who they are, and then they are in a position to invite them to be part of those commissions, because they're very important places where people make decisions about everyday life.
Absolutely. I have to step away, but thank you so much for doing this. It's great to meet you all, and I hope to see you all again somewhere else, somewhere in person someday soon. Take care. Congratulations, Makhi. Good job.
Jolyn, I think you had a comment. Please.
Yes. First, I need to tell Makhi I apologize because I misspelled your name in the beginning. I used an E. So I just want to recognize that and make sure if people do that, that they do that. But because I am on the opposite side and I was listening to what Antonia was saying, and I've experienced so much in Milford. I've been here since 1996, where I do have that fear. And even listening to Makhi now, like, how do I say something? Because I really have a bad experience that I'm going through right now, where they said, instead of having these small conversations, you're going to have to officially stand before the Board of Aldermen and talk about how my husband is the one and only Black firefighter that Milford ever had. And two city officials went ahead, shut me out to try and start a scholarship in my husband's name. And they actively, when I asked, who is this person? Because I didn't know the person who was starting it, they act like they didn't know him. And the person in city government who I worked with on 3 elections, come to find out this man is his mentor. He lives across the street from him. So they were purposely blocking me from, or usurping my authority along with my deceased husband to use his name for a so-called scholarship. And then I think about Sadia. They want scholarship for Black people to apply to the Milford Fire Department without going into the history as why is it from 1639 to 2022, you've only had 1 Black fireman, but yet and still you want to raise money. And I work at a foundation, that money sits for a while, it could be repurposed. So that would not be honoring my husband. So I'm getting my courage up, and I do have a lot of support. And I don't even know how I came upon this email for Connecticut Civic ambassadors, because that was bothering me, that we need more civic education. So this is really helping me. And I'm keeping up with a few ladies that I was in contact with yesterday on my progress. But I'd love to have you all stand with me, because it was racist. These two are in such high power in the town. And when I finally got to find this person and he's talking to me, I said, but can you tell me, how did you get to use my husband's name? And his response was, wait, let me tell you how I want to tell you. Even how they operated with me was so disparaging. And I let them know they were deceitful, dismissive, and disrespectful. So I'm going to ask the Board of Aldermen to stay true to what they said in 2022, that the town of Milford would not sit quietly when their neighbors and their residents have been hurt by racist acts. So I just thank you for even giving me the encouragement, Makhi, Sadia, Antonia, and Elizabeth. And I will keep you up on what's going on there, because this is active and happening right now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? Would anyone else, either on the panel or that's in our group here, would anybody else like to add something to the group? Kate, you had an interesting comment before. Could you elaborate on that a little bit?
Sure. Yeah, I had commented that I've gotten into it a few times, just informally advocating in my town. I live in a very rural town myself. And there was a proposal before the zoning commission around affordable housing coming into town. And of course, it launched all of the very vocal folks in town who really wanted to defend, quote, the rural character of the town. And as I'd mentioned, and I knew some of them, and as I'd mentioned in the chat, a lot of them were folks who were newer to the town. They were not people who participated in agriculture. Several of them were people who built or purchased homes that were on subdivided agricultural land that a farmer had to sell because they could no longer afford to keep it, right? So this notion of preserving agricultural character doesn't really relate to preserving agricultural character. It's code for making sure we keep the right people in town and keep the wrong people out. And so it's an extremely frustrating thing. And as I was listening to everybody and we were talking about the importance of participation in your local government, I was thinking about a couple of kind of systemic challenges to that. One is that I just wonder about Connecticut. I've lived here since 1987, and somewhere in the last decade or 15 years, I can't remember the timing, we removed all traces of any kind of county affiliation in our state, right? So it's like we just eliminated the shared sheriff's services. There's no county government, there's no shared administration. And to me, this seems like a very intentional move where we have a state that's basically 169 fiefdoms that each get to control what they do. And they don't have any accountability or responsibility to a larger segment of the state, which is why I think you see such centralization. The segregation piece is facilitated by this. So that's a big barrier. And then those local governments, the social media thing that has made running for office one of the most horrendous processes at the local level. It is so hostile, it is so nasty that it is daunting for anyone to kind of put their hat in the ring because they're opening themselves to sure abuse. So it makes, I've run a dialogue through Everyday Democracy in my past life working for a community action agency. I love your materials so much. I'm a big believer. And And it makes me wonder if there's some way to translate the benefits of that dialogue to action process into the internet space, into our social media platforms. I mean, the genie's kind of out of the bottle, but we've got to be able to reclaim this space to make it safe for people to talk to each other in a way that's respectful and allows people to connect as human beings. So that's where my mind has been going while you all have been talking, and I really appreciate everything that I've heard.
If I could just respond to Kate's comments about creating spaces for conversation. I think that intentionality again is really important, but I mean, and that's all well and good, but I think that in order to really build a space, like you really have to think about humility, you really have to create a space that is hospitable, and really I think that we found some success because when we came to this process and we started these dialogues, we really not just had these sort of mixed race dialogues and mixed ethnic dialogues, but we've also done affinity groups, right? We've also done affinity groups with BIPOC folks, and we've done affinity dialogues with white counterparts. We've also done immigrant dialogues. So really, sometimes it's great to like do these mixed race dialogues, but then sometimes it's good to sort of come together as like with your own community to sort of share all of the issues that we face as people. I also want to say something to Makhi, which is really important because we as adults are talking about all of the terrible things in this world. And it's not like we're doomed, Makhi, because change happens, and we need people like you, and we need people who do things in very small ways, because as Dr. Martin Luther King said, great things happen in sort of small ways, and we're all capable of that, right? Sometimes we might not be able to dismantle governments or corporate structures that continued like the systemic structures of racism, but we could do little things that make a huge difference. And please don't leave thinking that like this world is horrible.
And absolutely, if anyone can prove that that's true, it's you, Elizabeth, Antonia, and Makhi. You're individually doing these incredible things and engaging others, and then they engage others, and that's the ripple effect that you can have when you have civic leadership like that. So I wanted to ask Stephen, because you created the Red, White, and Blue schools, and I believe Sadia is part of one of the schools, right? Could you talk a little bit about that? Because I think the Red, White, and Blue schools create the spaces for civics learning. That is great.
Right. It's an organization. It's co-sponsored by the Department of Ed and the Secretary of State. And it really honors, it isn't an awards program. It's a recognition program for schools that do a good job of promote, and this could be broadly stated, promoting civic engagement. Because, there's where to me there's hope is just talk to people like Sadia and like people in every high school. There's some people that aren't, that are very engaged, that are, that kids are very engaged. And our program, the Red, White, and Blue ones, is a reward schools that foster that type of engagement. Aaron, could I ask you, you had an interesting point, if you wouldn't mind talking a bit about that?
Steve, excuse me, I'm sorry, I just see that Makhi has his hand raised. I know he needs to leave
I
soon, so I'm just
apologize,
worried we could
Makhi.
get
My
to him
apologies.
first.
Aaron, I'll get to you in 1 second, sir. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Makhi, you're up.
It's okay. I would like to say thank you for everyone for inviting me to this meeting. It's been really fun. Like Mr. C said before, I have another one to go to, but I would like to say thank you for everyone for inviting me, and thank you for everyone for being so nice.
We're proud of you, Makhi. We're proud of
Pleasure
you.
having you.
Great to
Well
have you
done.
here. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Aaron, would you mind commenting on the point that you made in the chat?
Sure, I'd be happy to. About public financing of elections, or about charter revision and plans of conservation and development and how that relates to zoning. Or I could do both.
How about the first one?
Yeah, sure. I think, you know, so much happens at the local level. I think as the group has already discussed, there's so many decisions being made, and we need diverse grassroots voices at the table. And two of the kind of local government processes that I think are really important that often get neglected and overlooked are the charter revision process, which every town is required to do, you know, decennially, so at least once every 10 years. And that's the basic structure of government. In a lot of ways, that's more important than who gets elected every 2 or every 4 years, because it can set the stage for what happens over many decades, long periods of time. So the basic structures and institutions of government is determined in the charter revision process. So I can't emphasize enough how important it is for grassroots activists, civic engagement activists to get involved in that process. And the same with the rewriting of plans of conservation and development, which is another thing that municipalities are required to do every 10 years. And what goes in your town's plan of conservation development, it actually governs what decisions your Board of Zoning Appeals and your City Plan Commission is supposed to make. So if you can get some language in your POCD that says, you know what, we support more diversity, we support more affordable housing and multifamily housing, then your BZA and your City Plan Commission is supposed to follow that when they're issuing rulings about zoning relief on particular projects. So I just think it's incredibly important for people to not just go out and vote, not just serve on boards and commissions, but get involved in these kind of long-term planning processes and planning documents as well. And the other thing I'd mention is we have a great program in New Haven. It's unique. It's the only one like it in the state of Connecticut. It's public financing for local elections. So it's a great complement to the state's program for public financing of state elections. And it really brings in a lot more grassroots diverse voices into the local political process. And, you know, we're giving matching donations. So if you give even $5 or $10 to a candidate, we're tripling, quadrupling that amount of money. So even small donors, their voices are accentuated and they're not drowned out by special interests and big political donors. So I would love to see that take off in other municipalities and see other places do local public financing of elections as well.
Val has given me the signal that I should, Val, that was very subtle, that I should wrap this up. Nicely done. This was, to me, a fascinating discussion. And Sadia, Elizabeth, Antonia, thank you for your contributions. And, you know, this is, you know, I wouldn't, for discussions this important, I don't think it's appropriate to say, you know, this conversation is over. I would always say in a conversation like this, to be continued. So thank you, appreciate it. And Val, back to you.
Thank you, Steve. Let's give him a round of applause. This great panelists. Thank you all. Wonderful, wonderful. So we're going to take a 10-minute bathroom break, and we will be back at, it's 2:13. We'll be back at 2:25 p.m. We're going to break into small groups, and Jackie is going to then give us some instructions and give us the choice to choose which of the small groups we want to be part of. Okay, and we're going to have the panelists be the facilitators of conversation. So you'll have a chance to engage with them more and to ask them questions and also share your own experiences. So we'll be back at 2:25 in 10 minutes. And thank you again for this great panel. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Stephen, for doing an excellent job. Thank you so much
Thank
for
you very much.
engaging. Thank you.
Great. We'll be back. Thank you. Okay, great. Yeah, let's get started with the next, the plenary. And let me just get the chat. Okay, great. Hey, Richard. Good to see you, my friend.
For everything.
Okay, great. So welcome back, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I was part of one of the groups with Antonia, the public policy group, and it was just really fascinating. Great conversation. I hope the rest of you had really robust and insightful conversations in your groups as well. So at this point, I would like to ask the facilitators, and we'll start with Antonia because she has to leave in about 9 minutes. To go to work. And so just want to hear, Antonia, from your group, what were some of the highlights and some of the points or topics that they raised in your conversation.
Okay. So we had policy advocation. And so I had a great group. I had Yadisi and I had also Miss Denise. And basically they all came to the table with their own process because they've been a part of the voting process. And that seemed to be the topic that came up consistently between all of us. And it's extremely important that we protect the voting rights because you can't have policies without voting rights. And so we both spoke about the fact that, systematically voter suppression is happening. Also, the biggest piece is with the diversity of Connecticut now, like a Boston and New York, Connecticut has never been this diverse. And it's getting, more and more diverse. We need to basically come up with the time to becoming compliant with the translation. There's a lot of people who do not understand English as a second language or who do not understand the jargon or the verbiage and with regards to the documents that they're going to be speaking about. And also, it's just really important to make people feel comfortable and have it accessible. So we all talked about voting suppression, how we can, get into our communities and get people more familiar with the voting process. Also, basically follow the bills. I think that UNICE put 2 bills in place, 437, I think, and 431 and 457, I think it is. And those are really important bills that are going through right now to prevent voter suppression. And Senator Looney, I know who he is. He's very, very open. We need to, contact him. And I think UDC should put that in the chat to make sure we protect those rights. For me, it's really big right now because I can see, I'm like a predictor. I don't know why I got this from my grandmother maybe. But right now, because of the homeless situation, and it's getting worse and worse and worse, there are a lot of people that are not going to be able to vote due to the fact that they don't have permanent address and residency. And I just think it's a travesty. And I think that we should start working on trying to find ways to put policies in place to make sure those people are accounted for. And we talked about that as well too. So the biggest piece was voter registration, voter suppression, accommodations, and when people do have to vote, and also making sure that the linguistic and cultural, that was one of the things that DC brought up, was a cultural aspect of it all around. Even in the legislation, process, there really is no outreach for people from different cultures and understanding where they're coming from, nor any compassion. And I haven't personally experienced that, but I can see how it happens because when you deal with the legislation of most organizations in Connecticut, there is no translation, there is no closed caption, there is no documents. I'm saying that are both bilingual. On one side English, the other side, Spanish, and that's something that struck me as odd. And all the organizations that I deal with, there's only one that has translations on the spot, but the documents and literature are not in another language. And so we have Hispanic from all different diasporas, not just from Puerto Rico, that speak different dialects. We also have Polish. Now we have Afghanistans, we have Ukrainians, and it just doesn't seem like we're accommodating people to be able to speak up and protect their rights. And that's something that I want to see happen. Did I sum it up?
that was great. That was great,
Thanks.
Antonia. And obviously I was in that group and we were talking about barriers, but also some of the best practices around.
Yes, exactly.
How to eliminate those barriers.
Yes.
To work with organizations for the homeless that
Right.
that you can provide them with resources and information.
Okay, and I want to yield to the Yandisi because she has been doing this.
Yeah, Yandisi,
and so I really think that she should fill in the tail end if I'm okay with that. And I just want to tell everybody to have a good day. I have to get back to
Thank you, Antonia.
But I
Thank you
really
so
enjoyed
much.
myself today and
Thank
yesterday
you.
as well too. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you,
Have a
Antonia. Take
wonderful
Thank you so
care.
much for being here.
No
Thank you.
problem.
Great
Have a
to have
wonderful
you.
weekend, everybody. Thank you so much.
Bye. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye. Yes. Yes, Yanitsi and Rachel and Jackie were also in the group. Anything else that that we should add to what Antonia said? I think she was very thorough, but there may have been some other things we missed.
I would say just that no, definitely the conversation, it's about the real-time necessities of our state's border protections and border access. And she highlighted pretty well everything that we discussed. If you allow me, I would be more than happy to add in this group the chat
Please.
the information about the 2 Senate bills that are up and running, and hopefully they will be raised. If you have any question, by all means, feel free to reach out to me. But this is something that I think that we are all in agreement to support legislations that provide full access of order to cast their ballots in a free and democratic form, as it should. So yeah, thank you for the opportunity.
Great. Thank you so much, Yanitsi. And I should mention Yanitsi is with the Hispanic Federation, which has state chapters. And you are with the Connecticut chapter, right? You head the chapter here?
So we are a national nonprofit organization. We have been in the state of Connecticut for the last 7 years. I have been working with the Hispanic Federation for the last almost 4 years now. And I am based out of Hartford. We have our offices, not chapters, but our offices in Hartford. And I oversee Massachusetts, Connecticut, and Rhode Island.
It's regional. Okay. Great.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Yanitsi. Thank you so much. Great. So the other group, I don't know if either Steve or Elizabeth, which one of you want to report? Either of you.
I'll go first if you don't mind, Stephen.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
So our group talked about race dialogues and the importance of conversation, right? And I think one of the most important things in all of this in terms of participating in dialogues is just to have the courage and to have that courage build up, because without courage and bravery, nothing is really ever shared that's truly valuable for change. And we also talked about the importance and the necessity of affinity, dialogues based on affinity, because sometimes our journey starts within our inner circle before it spreads outward.
Thank you, Elizabeth. And that's important because those of us who attended yesterday, the keynote, Kip Hawley was talking about how racism impacts everything, right? It impacts the civic engagement culture in which we find ourselves at any given time. And so understanding racism is important. And one of the ways that you can do that is engaging in dialogue around that topic. And Elizabeth has done some great dialogue work in Stanford using Everyday Democracy's Dialogue to Change process. So that's one way to really engage others in conversation, is to learn about dialogue facilitation and organizing for dialogue so that you can bring people to talk about race. And in that conversation, then understand what is the impact that racism has on our civic engagement cultures and on the way we practice civic engagement, in the way we engage or not engage others in civic engagement. So that's a really great points that you raised, Elizabeth. Thank you so much. And Steve, civics education.
Sure, and I'd ask my fine colleagues to speak as well, but I think our conversation centered around the complexity and the difficulties of civics education today. We had some discussions about teachers in schools being reluctant for various reasons to take on critical topics for fear of parental or other pressures. We also talked about it being difficult to teach about these topics when the very what is truth is an issue that is debated and creates another level of complication for teaching. So we talked about from the teaching perspective, we talked about the society, there's other ways. I mean, we talked about voting, and we talked about how to get people engaged in non-educational ways. So, you know, but I think that really it's education right now. It's interesting that many people would say that the key out of whatever turmoil we're in right now is civics education. Yet at the same time, so many people are deeply suspicious of that education. That's an interesting spot to be in. And Kate, I'd ask you or Jessica or Representative Thomas if any of you would have any more comments to make.
You did a fine job. I thought you did great.
I don't know if Representative Thomas, we were lauding the red, white, and blue schools program before. Val, she received a very pithy comment about the red, white, and blue. We won't ask her to repeat that, but let's just say, would it be fair to say, Representative Thomas, it wasn't totally supportive of the program? Would that be a fair statement?
I think that is very fair to say. The level of acrimony about how strongly held the belief was by this individual that civics and politics had no place in the school system was surprising and disheartening.
Yeah.
And it got a lot of likes, which is even more.
Yeah.
So I think our group came away with the thought that it's a complex time for education, and there's probably no
silver bullet,
easy fix or fix. We could not identify. Well, there's teachers and many people in the field of education that are going in every day and doing a bang up job.
Yeah.
But just it's hard to overcome some of the societal pressures that are going on.
And that's really a good point, Steve. And it also has to do with the fact that each town or each city or town in the state, each school board in the state has its own authority. So there can't be any statewide, mandated. And that speaks to the fact that, for example, the social studies framework that you developed, that you were part of developing, that you struggle even with that, because it was a framework that many school boards would not, necessarily embrace. So that's always a challenge, because you have, home rule is so much a part of the culture, the political culture in Connecticut, that school boards are very independent and they can decide what they want and what they don't want. So it's very hard because of the way we're structured in the state, so that's also important. Any other comments before we close? Before we do some closing remarks, I think these have been some really powerful conversations, I think. And in most cases, this is just the surface. These are conversations that need to happen every day, that we've just touched the surface, and we need to continue advancing them. And our role as civic ambassadors is to really raise those questions and also challenge others to think about these things and to address them and come up with solutions. And like Steve said, some of these solutions are not easy, but starting the conversation is a good way to start, I think. So thank you all for being part of those small group discussions. I'm going to close now the summit. Before I do, again, I want to thank our panelists, Steve, our moderator, also Elizabeth, Antonia, Makhi, and Sadia. Let's give them a round of applause, because I think they did a terrific job as panelists, but also as facilitators in their small groups. And let me just say that, I'm so proud to be with all of you, civic ambassadors. I think we are all in the front lines of really building the kind of civic engagement culture that Dwight Hawley talked about yesterday. a culture of inclusiveness and of practices that lead to and promote equity, not only in the context of civic engagement, but also in the outcomes that are derived from that kind of civic engagement. So we have to create opportunities for inclusive spaces for civic engagement. And Steve and his group talked about how do we create those spaces for children and youth, you know, by having programs like Kid Governor, right? Like the Red, White, and Blue Schools, and also doing other kinds of work with organizations. And we have Patrick here today with us, who is created an organization that focuses on civics, the Civic Institute, I believe it's called. So people like him, people like all of us that really can advance and advocate for civics education that creates those opportunities for children and youth. And of course, our keynote speaker and the other two panelists, Antonia and Elizabeth, you know, really helped us understand better how racism is in everything. Racism manifests itself in every aspect of our society and in our democracy. And civic engagement, of course, is no exception. So we need to be courageous to engage with others in honest conversation, respectful and inclusive dialogue on topics like topics of race, for example, and also how we can make sure that we're not replicating the kinds of practices that promote and continue to perpetuate racism in civic engagement and also in our communities and our democracy. So we have to be vigilant about that. And one of the things I should mention is in the chat room, I posted a link to the handbook that Dwight Hawley wrote, The Principles and Practices for Inclusive Civic Engagement. I really encourage you to read that piece of that book that he wrote. That's what he based his keynote on, and also the activities that we did yesterday. Okay, so before I close, I want to again thank. Before I close, I want to ask any of you who want to share what are some of the strategies and practices that you learned yesterday and today that you're committed to embracing, to adopting as you do civic engagement in your communities. And I'm going to open it up for anyone who wants to share.
Okay, I'll be first because I have my hand.
Thank you,
So,
Jolene.
yes, I'm committed to standing up, speaking up,
Great.
and encouraging others. And I did have my hand raised because I wanted to know, I know this was a 2-day summit today, but do you do this on a monthly basis? Or can you talk about that? Maybe not now,
Yes.
but.
Yes, absolutely. We have, and actually, Jackie, I'll turn it over to you because you could talk about the workshops that we've done in the past.
Yes, absolutely. So the summit is an annual thing, but we also do workshops and webinars throughout the year. Could be monthly, could be every other month, depending on our time. In the fall, we did one on redistricting and how that has created inequitable outcomes, kind of like Antonia was talking about with only, you know, having these 3 counties where Black and Brown folks are mostly living. And then we also did one recently that I created and presented on equitable public policy advocacy. And those are recorded and on Everyday Democracy's YouTube channel if you would like to check them out. But we will have others throughout the year that I think you've signed up to be a civic ambassador, so you'll get the newsletter and be invited to those. Yep. And we'll make sure, and also the newsletter will have other events that other organizations put on that we find out about that we want to send out to you guys.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Great. Thank you, Jackie. Anyone else? Anything that came out for you, that a takeaway that you're going to use in your civic work in your communities?
I just wanted to say thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I've spoke to some of the people in my group, but my name is Jessica Corbett, and I'm with Fulton County Government in Atlanta. And I just want to say thank you for welcoming me as I listened in and was able to share. Our county government hosts a program called Citizens University, but in kind of a post-pandemic world, we are very interested in expanding that, and listening to the perspectives today definitely give us a lot of ideas about really the idea of taking knowledge of government into action is what we're interested in. And just wanted to say thank you for allowing me to listen in on this wonderful event.
Thank you, Jessica. I'm so glad that you joined us today from Georgia. I should mention that you probably are familiar with Citizens University in Seattle, Washington, right? Eric Liu is the founder, and so I'm glad that you're creating your own Citizens University there in your home state. So thanks so much for participating and for sharing your thoughts as well. Anyone else?
Oh, Priscilla has her hand raised.
Priscilla, yes.
Yeah, just quickly. I moved here during the pandemic. I'm from Connecticut, but I haven't lived here in years. And I moved here from Charleston, South Carolina. And I want to thank you because I've been involved in this kind of work in other communities, and most recently Charleston. And it was really nice to have found you. I don't even know how I found you, and to have you here because I need people like you all, that y'all, as we say, to continue the work. And it's not the same issues are here that are in the South. I would just like to know in case you haven't lived there yet.
That's right. They're everywhere.
Well, thank you for being here when I showed up.
Great. Thank you, Priscilla. You are a civic ambassador. I remember your name. So it's great to have you as well as a civic ambassador member. Anyone else?
You got a hand raised down here, Val.
Steve?
No, Representative Thomas wants to speak.
Yes, Representative Thomas, please.
I can't face button. I don't know. I'm on the state-owned laptop, so anything can be happening. But, no, I just want, for me, my commitment is to do the uncomfortable, which includes running for office. And I never thought I'd be in politics. It certainly was never on my trajectory, but that was the end result of my own personal civic engagement. And I think until we have more people running for office that don't fit the mold, the mold will never be broken. So I encourage everyone to do that. And I'm trying to do the impossible myself again. So.
That is great, Representative Thomas. And Aaron Good mentioned earlier about the New Haven has a citizens, I forget what they call it, election fund, right? Or something like that. We know we have the state of Connecticut election fund that helps candidates for local office to be able to finance their campaigns. And so that used to be a barrier for many, especially Black and brown people who wanted to run for office, that they could not raise the kind of money to compete with other candidates that had money to run for public office. And now the state has the Connecticut Election Fund, and also New Haven is an example of a municipality that has implemented an election fund. So as civic ambassadors, we can also go to people in our towns and try to create those kinds of funds, through donations, working perhaps with nonprofit organizations and private donors and the corporate people. Try to build these kinds of campaign finance funds so that people of color and others who don't have the resources can then be part of the political process. So thank you so much, Representative Thomas, for sharing that. We have time for one more takeaway or commitment.
Looks like Elise raised her hand.
Yes, Elise, please.
I would, excuse me, I would suggest that each ambassador take a look at their town government and see if you have an ethics commission that is in place and functioning. And if not, realize that the state requires each town and city to have an ethics board of some sort. And there are some that are dragging their feet and need a little push. So you could be that pusher.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Elise. And that speaks to who we are, civic ambassadors. We can be troublemakers, quote unquote. We know it's not about trouble. We're doing good things. But for some people, that could be trouble. But it's for the betterment of everyone, for the betterment of our democracy and our communities. And there's going to be a few who are not going to like that, but they need to be on call, and they need to be held accountable for not doing what they're supposed to do. So thank you, Elise, for sharing that. Any last comments from anyone before I close and we do the swearing in of the civic ambassadors? Okay, so let me just say thank you all for being part of the summit yesterday and today. Having these conversations with civic ambassadors and with others who are not maybe civic ambassadors, but they are engaged in their communities anyway. So they are civic ambassadors in action. And we encourage them to become civic ambassadors also in name. And so Jackie is going to post in the chat room the link to how you can learn more about becoming a civic ambassador member. And also we're going to be listing, we're going to include the link to the article by Kip Hawley. And also Jackie is going to post the link to the survey. We're going to ask that you please fill out the survey. It helps us really plan better summits every year. We learn from your comments and your thoughts on how successful and how beneficial this summit was for you, so that we can plan better summits in the future. I do want to thank again our panelists and moderator, Stephen, Sally, Elizabeth, Antonia, Sadia, and Makhi. I want to thank also my colleagues, Jacqueline Riverti, Naisha McCauley, Jennifer Morrison, and Agnes Torres, who were part of the planning effort for the summit. And then once again, I want to thank the sponsors for the summit, starting, of course, with Everyday Democracy, the organization that Jackie and I work for. And then, of course, Connecticut Humanities for its grant funding in support of the summit. We want to thank Secretary of the State, Denise Merrill, and the Deputy Secretary, Scott Bates, for joining us yesterday. And for Secretary Merrill, her longstanding leadership and support of the Civic Health Project and the Civic Ambassadors Program. We want to thank the Kirwan Institute for the study of race and ethnicity, for the great work that they have contributed, and for also allowing us to have Dwight Hawley, the keynote speaker, who did not charge us anything. So I do want to thank the Kirwan Institute for their support of the summit. And then, of course, I want to thank the Hartford Public Library for hosting us yesterday at the library as part of the summit. So now I mentioned that Jackie is going to put some links there for you. Please take the opportunity to click on the survey link. Take a couple of minutes to fill it out. And also, I want to mention that this is being recorded. The summit yesterday was recorded as well. So we're going to be posting the link. We're going to post the video on YouTube, and then we're going to post the link in the newsletter for the Civic Ambassadors, the main newsletter, but also all of you will receive the link by email. So be attentive to that you're going to be receiving the link to the video in case you want to watch any of it or you want to share it with others, okay? In closing, I want to mention that if you are a Civic Ambassador, you should have received an envelope with a flash drive and the Connecticut Civic Ambassadors button, like the one I have that I'm wearing here. If you haven't received it, you will receive it in the next few days. It depends on when you registered, but Jackie will make sure that all of you who registered will get the button and also the thumb drive. The thumb drive has some really fantastic resources there. It has some handouts, organizing materials, all kinds of articles and materials to read, to learn from, that you can use in your civic engagement work. So I encourage you to check out the toolkit that is inside the drive, and because I think it will be really helpful to you as you continue doing your great, outstanding civic work. And then finally, if you haven't registered to become a Civic Ambassador, please do so. We have regular events every month or every 2 months, trainings like the ones Jackie mentioned, and of course the annual Civic Ambassador Summit. And then there's a newsletter, a monthly newsletter that you will get that has information about different kinds of issues like voting, organizing, and civic leadership, and also opportunities for you to get engaged in different ways, locally and also in other parts of the state. Okay, so at this point, I'm going to ask my colleague, Jackie, to step in and share information about swearing in the civic ambassadors and doing the ceremony. So Jackie, all yours.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Val. All right. And so I know that some of you might not have received the pledge that came in the envelopes yet, but I'm going to put the pledge on the screen. And if you would like to unmute and read along with me, we will all do the pledge together. So 1 second.
That's great.
All righty. Can everybody see? Is it big enough?
Yes.
All right, great.
Raise your right hand or left hand.
Everybody raise your right hand and say along with me. As a civic ambassador, I pledge to be a dedicated and engaged member of my community who will uphold civic values of civility, respect for our democratic institutions, principles of social justice, and nonpartisan civic action that will improve my community. I further pledge that in every role which I may hold influence, I will carry forth the message that civic participation is a transformative experience that benefits us as individuals, our communities, and our democracy. I further pledge to devote at least 1 hour a week to working with others across difference, to create opportunities for civic participation and engage those I come in contact with in endeavors that will strengthen Connecticut's civic health. Lastly, as a civic ambassador, I pledge to share stories of my civic action work with others as a way to be a super carrier of great civic citizenship who inspires others to follow my example for the betterment of our state and nation. So I proudly pledge on this day, Friday, April 29, 2022, to be a Connecticut Civic Ambassador.
Congratulations.
Congratulations to all Connecticut Civic Ambassadors. Thank you all so much for being here.
Thank you, everyone. It's been great having you. Please consider becoming an ambassador if you're not. I'm going to wish you all a wonderful afternoon, and we will continue working with you in the future. So thank you all for participating. Have a nice evening.
Thank you all. It's nice to
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.